At a normal school, a bad teacher means extra homework. At Hogwarts, it means you lose all the bones in your arm. I've ranked every single Hogwarts teacher from all 7 Harry Potter books, from the worst to the best. Make sure to like and subscribe or I'll mail you a howler. I'm putting these two together because honestly, they function as a single unit of evil, and separating them would just be giving them more screen time than they deserve. The Carrows are the easy answer for the absolute worst teachers in Hogwarts history, and it's really not close. Installed by Voldemort when he took over the Ministry, these two weren't educators, they were war criminals with lesson plans. Alecto taught Muggle studies, a class that used to be about understanding and appreciating non-magical people, and turned it into a hate seminar. Muggles are dirty, Muggles are lesser. That was the entire curriculum. Her brother Amicus was worse. He renamed Defense Against the Dark Arts to just Dark Arts, and made students practice the Cruciatus Curse on each other as punishment. When Neville Longbottom refused to participate, they scarred his face and tried to kill him. Neville was 15 years old. No one else on this list comes close. They weren't teaching. They were running a junior Death Eater recruitment program inside a school. I genuinely think there's an argument that Umbridge belongs at the very bottom. But here's the thing that makes Umbridge so uniquely evil. Umbridge wore a pink cardigan and spoke in a sing-song voice and still carved words into children's hands with a blood quill. Beyond the torture, she refused to teach actual magic. Her defense against the dark arts class was just kids reading textbooks, while an actual dark wizard was rebuilding himself outside the castle walls. She banned student clubs, fired teachers she didn't like, and ran the school like a particularly menacing HR department. The fact that she's a real, recognizable type of person, the smiling authority figure who hides cruelty behind procedure, is what makes her so unforgettable, and so genuinely terrifying. I'll give Quirrell this much, he wasn't actually the worst defense against the dark arts teacher in pure classroom terms. He knew his subject. Students learned things in his class. The problem, obviously, is the Dark Lord living on the back of his head, carrying Voldemort under a turban, trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and attempting to murder a first-year student are all significant drawbacks for someone in a teaching position. I don't think that's a controversial take. Points deducted. A lot of them. Here's the thing I have to admit. The 4th-year defense against the dark arts class was genuinely excellent. Students learned about the unforgivable curses. They got real, hands-on practical experience. The man delivering all of it was a Death Eater running a year-long con to deliver a 14-year-old to Voldemort. Bartemius Crouch Jr. imprisoned the real Mad-Eye Moody in a magical trunk, impersonated him flawlessly for an entire school year, using Polyjuice Potion, and rigged the Triwizard Tournament so Harry would grab a portkey at the finish line. Crouch put real effort and real skill into his teaching, for completely sinister reasons. That's a level of commitment to manipulation that I find deeply unsettling. Filch is not a teacher, he is the school caretaker. And I'll be honest, I find Filch genuinely interesting. In the same way I find a car crash interesting. He wanders the corridors at night with his cat Mrs. Norris, specifically hoping to catch students breaking rules. He keeps a collection of chains in his office, oiled, maintained, ready, in the hope that he will one day be permitted to use them on students. Here's where I start to feel, reluctantly, a little bad for him. Filch is a squib, born to a magical family with zero magic of his own. He works at a school that runs entirely on magic, surrounded by children who can do things he will never be able to do. He secretly ordered a mail-order course called Quick Spell, trying to teach himself spells. It didn't work. He mops up magical disasters by hand, while 11-year-olds levitate things around him. I understand why he's bitter. I genuinely do. But understanding it doesn't make him less of a menace to every student in that building, and the chains are hard to get past. Do you feel sorry for Filch? Because I kind of do, and it bothers me. Lockhart is, in my opinion, the funniest entry on this entire list. He never really tried to hurt the students. He just had absolutely no ability to help them either. The man was a complete fraud. Every book, every monster defeated, every adventure stolen. He'd track down the brave witches and wizards who actually did the work, interview them for their stories, then wipe their memories with an obliviate charm and publish their experiences as his own. His entire career was built on theft and amnesia. It's honestly impressive in the worst possible way. As an actual teacher, he released a cage of Cornish pixies on his first day, panicked immediately, and hid while they tore the room apart. He tried to fix Harry's broken arm after a Quidditch injury, and instead removed every single bone in it. What Lockhart lacked in competence, he made up for entirely in confidence, which is genuinely the most dangerous combination possible. He belongs near the bottom, but unlike everyone above him, he was mostly just a spectacular failure, rather than an active threat. Honestly though, where does Lockhart rank in your personal Hogwarts villains list? Because I don't think he's a villain exactly. He's something weirder than that. I have a personal grudge against Binns, because the history of magic is one of the most genuinely fascinating subjects you could possibly teach. Magical wars, dark wizards, giant uprisings, the whole thing is incredible. And Binns somehow made it boring enough that students scheduled their naps around it. That's probably why they cut him from the movies. He literally died one day, sat down in front of a fire, fell asleep, and never woke up, and then stood up out of his own body as a spirit, and went straight to class the next morning. I respect the dedication on some level, but the dedication is entirely misplaced, and the subject suffers enormously for it. He is a monument to what happens when someone is so committed to the routine that they literally cannot stop, even when death gives them a very clear exit. What's the most boring class you ever had in school? Because I guarantee Binns beats it. Drop it in the comments. I want to know. Snape discourse is practically its own genre at this point, and I'm about to throw myself into it head first. Let me say what I genuinely think. Snape is the most frustrating entry on this entire list, because he was genuinely brilliant and genuinely terrible in equal measure, and the terrible part was a choice. Here's the proof of his genius. When Harry Potter accidentally found Snape's old annotated potions textbook, just following the margin notes made Harry the best student in the class. Snape had been improving on centuries-old potion recipes as a teenager. If he had actually taught those insights clearly, generously, the way a good teacher does, every student at Hogwarts would have been extraordinary. Instead, he bullied children. Every day, he played favorites. He tormented Neville Longbottom so relentlessly and so personally that Neville's boggart, the magical creature that turns into your worst fear, took the form of Snape. Not the people who tortured his parents, his potions teacher. Yes, Snape was a war hero. Yes, his sacrifice mattered enormously. I'm not dismissing any of that. But he was secretly good, does not undo years of watching a grown adult terrorize a nervous kid because of a resentment that child had nothing to do with. And Harry naming his son after him remains, I'm sorry, one of the stranger decisions in the entire series. I'll die on that hill. I'll fight anyone in the comments about it. Let's go. Where do you rank Snape? Because I have a feeling this is where I lose half of you. Tell me exactly why I'm wrong. Madam Pince runs the library the way a dragon runs its hoard, with total possessiveness and a willingness to breathe fire at anyone who gets too close. She puts curse warnings on the books. She has thrown students out for sneezing. Students called her the Dementor of the library, which is a very specific and collaborative insult that clearly required real shared suffering to arrive at. She cares more about the condition of the books than whether anyone is actually learning from them, which is exactly backwards for a librarian. She is not dangerous, she is not evil, she is just completely wrong for the job she has, and the fact that the best academic resource in the school feels like a threat is genuinely a failure of leadership on someone's part. I'm looking at you, Dumbledore. Trelawney is the teacher I find most fascinating to think about, and I genuinely go back and forth on where she belongs on this list. Here's the thing, she's a real seer who is also mostly a complete fraud, and she has no idea which is which. Her classroom is permanently overheated, smells like a perfume factory, and every lesson ends with someone being told they're going to die soon. She's exhausting in a very specific theatrical way. Hermione Granger, a person with the patience of an actual saint, famously quit her class in open disgust and never looked back. But here's what I keep coming back to. Trelawney has made some of the most important prophecies in the entire wizarding world. She just blacks out when it happens and doesn't remember any of it. She has genuine, significant power buried underneath all the performance. She just can't access it on purpose. That makes her less of a fraud and more of a tragedy, honestly. A genuinely gifted person who's been faking it for so long, she can no longer tell the difference. I find that kind of sad in a way I wasn't expecting. Do you think Trelawney deserves more credit than she gets? I'm genuinely split on this one. Before Hagrid, there was Kettleburn, the original Care of Magical Creatures teacher, who loved dangerous beasts with the same reckless warmth that Hagrid would later take to an even more dangerous extreme. Kettleburn retired having lost an arm and most of a leg to his own classroom subjects. The official reason given for his departure was to spend more time with his remaining limbs, which is both very funny and a little horrifying. I want to be clear about something. Slughorn is a genuinely good potions teacher. In a classroom sense, he is knowledgeable, engaging, and happy to share what he knows. His classes on Felix Felicis, the luck potion, and other advanced topics were real, valuable education. But he has one blind spot so massive, it defines his entire tenure. He only really teaches the students he finds impressive. He ran the Slug Club, exclusive dinner parties for students with famous parents or exceptional talent, and if you weren't invited, you might as well have been invisible to him. His favoritism wasn't cruel the way Snape's was. It was just quietly, persistently unfair in a way that probably felt worse to be on the receiving end of. He's warm, he's funny, and I genuinely think he'd be a delight to have dinner with. He also would have completely ignored at least half the people watching this video. Would you have been in the Slug Club or not? Because I think most people watching this overestimate their chances. I love Hagrid. I want to say that up front because everything I'm about to say might sound like I don't, and that would be wrong. Hagrid has the biggest heart of anyone on this list. He also has absolutely no understanding of what constitutes a safe classroom experience for a 13-year-old, and those two things exist in him in perfect, catastrophic balance. He introduced his Care of Magical Creatures class to hippogriffs on the very first day. Massive, proud creatures that will attack you if you look at them wrong. He bred something called blast-ended scroots, which were explosive, had no known practical purpose, and apparently existed purely because Hagrid thought they were interesting. He thought all of this was delightful and couldn't imagine why anyone would feel differently. Students were genuinely in danger in his class, and some of them got hurt. That has to count for something on a ranking like this. But the reason he sits this high is that it was never, for a single second, malicious. Hagrid loved dangerous things the way some people love dogs, and he couldn't conceive of the idea that not everyone shared that feeling. Grubbly Plank was the substitute Care of Magical Creatures teacher who covered for Hagrid during his various absences, and I think she was objectively better at the job than he was. Where Hagrid brought hippogriff accidents and explosive scroots, Grubbly Plank brought unicorns, calm, controlled lessons. Students came away having actually learned something without anyone requiring medical attention. Hermione appreciated her classes. Even students who loved Hagrid had to admit the lessons were good. She doesn't rank higher only because she was never around long enough to build any real relationships with students. But as a pure teacher, she's better at the specific job than the person whose job it is. I know at least half of you are furious with me right now. Go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong. Professor Babbling taught ancient runes, the study of old magical symbols and how to interpret them, and by all accounts she was perfectly good at it. Students who took the class found it genuinely useful and came away knowing things. She never made headlines, she never caused a crisis, she never put anyone in danger. On a staff this chaotic, I want to be clear, that is not faint praise, that is a real meaningful achievement. Professor Vector taught arithmancy, which is essentially magical mathematics, using numbers and calculations to predict and understand magical events. It is one of the hardest elective courses Hogwarts offers, and Hermione Granger took it voluntarily and thrived, which tells you it requires real intellectual rigor. Vector taught it well, kept the class running without incident, and sent students out with a genuinely difficult skill. She is steady, reliable, and completely overshadowed by everyone around her, which on this staff is basically the ideal outcome. I think Burbage deserves more attention than she usually gets, and I want to take a moment here. She taught Muggle Studies the real version, not the hate seminar the Carrows later ran, and she did it with genuine conviction. She believed that non-magical people were worthy of understanding and respect. She even published an article making the argument to a wider audience. That article got her killed. Voldemort murdered her personally at the beginning of the war in front of an audience of Death Eaters for writing that Muggles deserved equal treatment. She died for an opinion that should have been completely uncontroversial, and the fact that it wasn't says everything about the world she was living in. She was a good teacher and a genuinely brave person. She deserved so much better than what she got. Professor Sinister taught astronomy from the highest tower in the school at midnight, which is either the most romantic classroom setting imaginable or the most exhausting, depending entirely on how you feel about sleep deprivation. Students learn to chart the stars and track the movements of planets. The subject is genuinely beautiful when you think about it. Nobody got hurt, nobody's memories got wiped, nobody lost any limbs. I know that sounds like I'm setting the bar on the floor, but look at this list and tell me I'm wrong. I think Firenze is one of the most underrated people in the entire series, and I don't think that's a controversial take. I just think people forget about him. To centaurs, working for humans is a profound humiliation. The herd that had been his whole community cast him out permanently. Dumbledore converted an entire classroom into a replica of the forest floor for him. Firenze lay on the ground and taught divination the way centaurs actually practice it, reading the slow patterns of planets and stars over years and decades, rather than predicting next week's weather from someone's tea leaves. He was more honest about the limits of prophecy than Trelawney ever was, and more genuinely gifted. She teaches first years how to fly, referees Quidditch, and somehow stays calm while children launch themselves into the sky on wooden death sticks. She's experienced, knows broom mechanics, and did I mention she was a certified baddie? Madame Pomfrey runs the hospital wing at a school that, on a completely routine week, produces students with shattered bones, magical burns, memory damage, and injuries from creatures that most adult wizards would run from. She handles all of it, without drama, without complaint. She fixes the problem and tells you to stay in bed, and that last part she means. Pomfrey keeps this school from having a much, much higher body count. Sprout is one of my favourite people on this list because she represents something I genuinely admire. She just does the work quietly and completely and doesn't make it about herself. She teaches herbology, runs Hufflepuff House, and when the basilisk was petrifying students and the school was in active crisis, Sprout quietly grew the mandrakes needed for the cure, tended them for months, harvested them at exactly the right moment, and saved every single petrified student's life. She is more useful in a genuine emergency than half the people on this list. Don't let the fact that Flitwick has to stand on a stack of books to see over his own desk fool you into thinking he's anything less than extraordinary. He is a former dueling champion, one of the most technically skilled magical minds in the school, and one of its most quietly essential defenders. He taught the castle's front doors to recognize a picture of Sirius Black and refuse him entry. During the Battle of Hogwarts, he cast the shield spells that held the castle together and personally defeated Antonin Dolohov, the Death Eater responsible for killing Remus Lupin. He got revenge for a friend and defended the school simultaneously. Flitwick is exceptional in every way that matters. He just never makes noise about it, and I think that's exactly why he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. I'll say it plainly, Lupin was the best defense against the dark arts teacher Hogwarts ever had, and it's not remotely close. The fact that he only held the position for a single year is one of the tragedies of the entire series. He actually taught. Day one, he brought a boggart into class and had every student face their worst fear. He took Neville Longbottom, the same kid that Snape had spent years destroying, and gave him a genuine public moment of triumph that Neville carried with him for years. He tailored his lessons to what students actually needed, made difficult magic feel possible, and treated every student like they were capable. Students who had Lupin for 1 year came away more prepared than some managed after 7 years with other teachers. Dumbledore is the greatest wizard alive and one of the strangest people to ever run a school, and I mean that as a genuine compliment. His first speech to the student body was 4 words: nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, and then he sat down. He hides enormous power behind deliberate eccentricity, and it works completely. Students trusted him so deeply that they fought for him in his absence and painted his name on walls when the school was occupied. He loses the top spot for a reason I feel pretty strongly about. Dumbledore kept too many secrets from the people who needed the information most, and people died because of it. He plays a very long game, and he is usually right. He also kept hiring catastrophically bad defense against the dark arts teachers, year after year. I have genuinely no explanation for this, and it bothers me more than it probably should. McGonagall takes the top spot, and I don't think it's particularly close. She's the best teacher at Hogwarts because she manages to be strict, warm, fair, and fierce all at once, and that combination is genuinely rare. I'll be honest, she's the teacher I would have wanted. The kind where you know exactly where you stand, where the rules are completely consistent, and where you also know, without it ever being said directly, that she would go to war for you if it came to that. She'll give you detention without hesitation, and then quietly slide a biscuit from her tartan tin across the desk if she can see you're struggling. She makes both of those moments feel like the same thing, which is that she takes you seriously. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she animated every stone, statue, and suit of armor in the castle and marched them out to fight. She became a general the moment the school needed one. She became headmistress eventually, which was the right call. She had been the one holding things together for years already. McGonagall is the gold standard.